Pastor Jimenez, I love your story about the fact that atheists show up. Some of my most favorite conversations are conversations with atheists, particularly drunk atheists. Like last night at 10 o'clock at the end of a wedding ceremony, when a drunk atheist said, "Would it be okay if I showed up at your church? Would it be okay if we had a conversation sometime? You're not going to hate me for being an atheist, will you?" And the answer is no, just show up, let's just talk. So I love it. All right. Well, brothers and sisters, you remember that television show? Oh, my name is Jason Perkowski. I'm the pastor at Faith at UMC and Oregon Community UMC. Faith, they've got 65 folks on a Sunday morning. Oregon, we've got a dozen. And so if Jesus can work with a dozen, and I figure through me, maybe, despite me, he can do the same thing in my small church too. How many of you remember the television show Cheers? I love that show because I love the theme song. The theme song was, sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. And they're always glad that you came. You want to go where you can see our troubles are all the same. You want to be where everybody knows your name. There's something special about walking into a place and being known. And so when I was asked to speak here today, to know and to be known was the theme that came to mind. And so that's what I want to talk about today. The fact that as a small church, that's not a disadvantage. It's a major advantage to be a small church, because when you walk in, everybody knows your name. When you walk in, it's like, "Hey, Norm. Hey, Bob. Hey, Sister Sally." They know your name, and they're glad that you're there. And when you're not there, they miss you. There's something special about being a small church. And so there's 4 things I want you to remember today. 1, first of all, you aren't as small as you think you are. 2, small ain't bad. 3, if you do small well, you ain't going to stay small long. And 4, don't neglect the deep discipleship that is the benefit and the purpose of being small in the first place. So let's talk about what it means that when I say that you aren't as small as you think you are. First of all, y'all are United Methodists. You know that, right? That means that you're not nearly as small as you think you are, because you're part of a global movement that's going to turn 288 years next month. 288 years of the Methodist Wesleyan movement. We've got 12 million United Methodists across the globe. We've got over 80 million people that are part of the Wesleyan Methodist movement. In the U.S., we are the second largest Protestant denomination. We're the largest mainline denomination in the United States. And if you're properly engaged in connectionalism, that means you're part of UMCOR, which is doing disaster relief for hurricanes and for fires and for floods. As we speak, you're bigger than you think you are, because that's you. UMCOR is you. We've got advocacy work being done in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and in Washington, D.C., and at the United Nations building in New York. That's you. You're bigger than you think you are. You're involved in the publication of innumerable liturgical, teaching, preaching, and inspirational texts, prose and poetry, and hymns out of our Cokesbury publishing house. That's you. There are new church plants in Pennsylvania and internationally. That's you. New faith communities being started. When somebody comes and says, we could use a church because there's no church in our community, in our little backwoods village in the middle of nowhere. And you help start it. That's you. We've got missionaries working across the globe. We are bigger than we think. But being small ain't a bad thing in the first place. Now that we have established how big you are, I want you to think about the fact that you're also small, and that that's a good thing. See, right from the beginning, this transcontinental movement that we call Methodism, the goal is how to help a big church be small. How do you help an Anglican church that goes across an entire country? It's connected to a Catholic church that goes across the globe. How do you help them get small enough that they can do discipleship the way that they were intended to? So John and Charles Wesley said, we need to get small. They started with 4 folks 288 years ago at Oxford University, 4 of them that met. And they said, we're not certain that we're doing this whole faith walk thing well. We're not certain that we understand this God thing well or the Bible well. Can we meet together and talk about it and pray about it? So they established societies and classes and bands so that the Anglican church could get small again, so they could really understand their faith. They could better take care of one another. That's what we're all about. Sometimes as small churches, we suffer from an inferiority complex. We say, well, we only have 20 or 30 members, Bishop. We're probably going to have to shut down. Don't even bother sending me there, because I ain't going to be there long. But we sometimes fail to realize is that the mega churches are trying to figure out how to be like us. The mega churches are trying to figure out how to make their huge church feel small again so that people feel loved. So when people walk in, somebody knows their name. I've got the honor of pastoring two small churches, a dozen at one and 65 at the other. And I asked my folks the other day when I was telling them that I was going to be here today and ask them to log in online and be a part of this. They said, we like that whole small church and we love being part of a small church. We don't necessarily want to get huge. Because we like being in a place where we show up and we don't get lost. See, now I got to push them because I don't want that idea of wanting to be small and feeling comfortable in that small place. Which one's working?
Oh, yeah.
Check, check.
That was one.
All right. Okay, we're trying here. So I got to make sure they don't get so comfortable in their smallness that they forget to welcome in other folks. But small churches do several things really, really well. Small churches enable everyone to find a place to serve according to their gifts. Isn't that what small churches do? Everybody's needed because you're small. There are no bench warmers in a small church. So one of the things that we do is when somebody walks in, we say, well, what do you like to do? What are your gifts and talents? How can we enable you to be part of this mission? They're going, what, me? Little old me? I've got something to offer. It's like, yes, you do. You were knit together in your mother's womb, and God knew it, and He had a plan for you, and He loves you, and He adores you, and He wants you to find a place to serve where you can feel fulfilled. Small churches are good about helping everybody be needed. Whether they're handing out the bulletins, or whether they're painting the wall that's gotten old and used up, or whether they're the person that's pushing the wheelchair for that little old lady when she shows up in the parking lot into her seat. You find a spot for everybody to serve. And we as church leaders need to be deliberate about that. We need to make sure that we're listening for where people's gifts and talents are. I had a woman come to my church the other day, the other month, probably about 4 months ago. She walks in, and I got to talking to her after church, and she mentioned that she had taken piano in college. I said, well, we could use a substitute pianist. I was paying attention. She's been playing the organ now every week for the last month and a half with a regular pianist and filling in when our regular pianist is not available. When the young man that says, I want to be a coder, I want to make video games when I grow up, and I said, well, would you like to take over building the church's website? That's coding, get you some experience. Do you want to step in? Yes, Pastor, I'll do that. When I hear that somebody received a card from Sister Sally, and they talk about how touched they were that Sister Sally thought about them enough to send them a card, I'm going to Sister Sally and say, Sister Sally, if we buy you 100 cards, can you make sure everybody gets a card this year? That nobody's birthday gets missed, nobody's anniversary gets missed, nobody's in the hospital gets missed. We need to find a place for people to serve. And it's just a card, Pastor. It wasn't a big deal, but it was a big deal. It mattered to somebody. So let's make sure we're good at this. In a small church, everybody gets cared for by the whole body. When somebody's sick, all of a sudden soup shows up in a small church. When there's an emergency, all of a sudden there's a coffee klatch at the end of the service, and they're working out who's going to go and visit when, and who's going to take care of that need, and who's going to bring the groceries, and who's going to get somebody to the hospital, and who's going to be with them to visit, because that's what small churches do, because they know everybody, they know everybody's business. And it ain't a bad thing as long as we're gracious about it, right? Everybody has a chance to be celebrated in a small church. When somebody's granddaughter has a dance recital, it's likely the whole church is going to show up and sit in the front row and to be able to clap louder and hoot and holler louder than anybody else in that room, because that's what small churches do. When the first child is born, all of a sudden you got 24 grandparents now ready to take care of that baby, because that's what small churches do. So small ain't bad. Third thing is, if you do small well, you ain't going to stay small long. See, there's a couple of things I want you to pay attention to if you're a small church. Because if you're going to be small, you got to do small well. First of all, you need to establish some systems. See, it's really easy in a small church to just kind of let things roll. But if you establish systems to help with leadership development, when you say, hey, somebody's got a gift, how are we going to help them do better at it? When you establish systems to help with visitation or card sending or celebration, if you get good at that, one of the things you're going to find is that you're ready when the jump in attendance happens. Because there's a danger that says if you only want to stay small, you will stay small. because you won't put systems in place to help you grow. Because when your flock grows from 12 to 24, from 65 to 75, there can be a break in your systems. You can't do things the way that you used to do them. You need to have a plan in place that when more people show up in the pews, when more people show up to visit, you know how you're going to get letters out to them and cards to them, and how you're going to get their contact information in your roles so you can stay in communication with them. You need to establish systems so when those small numeric jumps happen, your system is ready for it. You've got a shepherding committee in place that's already sending the cards, tracking the names and numbers of folks that are coming into your church, is visiting folks when they show up on a Sunday, that by the end of the week they've already gotten a call from a lay person, a letter from the pastor, and a visit from the pastor, because you've got shepherding systems in place. You want to make sure that you've got systems in place where people in the pews are telling you when there's a need, because when it's a church of 12, you know it, but when it's a church of 50, you may miss something if somebody ain't telling you, so you got to get your church ready for that. You need to be formalizing your nomination systems and talent surveys each year so that you're formally asking people what they like to do and what they're good at so you can plug them into those places. You need to make sure you're doing a good job with your web presence and your bulletins and your newsletters, because with 12 people, you can tell everybody what the news is from Lake Wobegon. But when it's 50, you need to have other systems in place so that they know what's happening and they're invited in. And I said before, there are very few spectators at a small church. You can't just be a bench warmer. But I'm going to piggyback off of what Pastor Amanda says. We're on the same wavelength, brother. You got to be able to pass the baton. And we need to be deliberate about passing the baton. Because if the same people are doing the same job 10 years from now that they're doing today, one, there's a danger they're going to get burnt out. And then they're just going to leave, and who's going to do the job? Or they're going to get hit by a bus. And then where are we? Because my most famous phrase, I say to all my people, in case I get hit by a bus, here's where I put that file. In case I get hit by a bus tomorrow, here's where the permission slips are. In case I get hit by a bus, here's how we do communion. In case I get taken out of the race, you need to be able to pick up the baton and keep going, because it ain't about me, it's about Jesus, it's about the movement, it's about the mission. And we need to be training up and making space for the young folks that are coming up behind us, and the new folks, whatever age they are, coming up behind us. We need to be training them. So for every person that's in charge of the committee, they need to be told that their job is to train somebody else to replace them in case they get hit by that bus, or in case they get tired and they need a break. We need to be training up the people to come up behind us. So, the last point, number 4, don't neglect deep discipleship, because here's the deal. The benefit of being small is that we know one another by name. Wesley started small, which means he was all up in people's business. He's asking them questions. How is it with your soul? He was kicking people out of the church if they were caught philandering, or just being lazy, or not studying the Word, or not making it to communion on a Sunday, because he was all up in their business. He knew them, and he had a responsibility to hold them accountable. And so they didn't get a ticket to show up at the society meeting for a whole quarter. If they got kicked out, they had to wait a quarter to get back in. And they wanted to get back in. They wanted to get their life straight so they could get back in, because they wanted to be a part of a small community. They wanted to be someplace where everybody knew their name. And so they allowed Wesley and the other society leaders and band leaders and class leaders to be up in their business to hold them accountable. We need to be getting small with prayer and getting together for Bible study and serving and engaging with the community. Right from the beginning, with 4 people, they were out doing hospital visits, jail visits, visiting orphanages, schools, and starting medical clinics, because even in their smallness, they had big dreams that says we can engage with the community, we can do better because it's good for our souls, and it's good for the places where God has called us to serve, because the world is our parish. We need to make sure that we do not neglect deep discipleship. So here's the deal. You aren't as small as you think you are. You're part of a huge movement. Small ain't bad in the first place, so just get good at doing small. And if you do small well, you aren't going to stay small, so be ready for the growth. And 4, while you're at it, while you're small, pay attention to the souls of your brothers and sisters that are in the pews with you. Can I get an amen? Amen.